76,000 people die every year because of our privatized healthcare system. They don't have health insurance. So are we allowed to talk about other deaths? Are we also allowed to talk about those 76,000 people who are dead?
Members of Ben Shapiro's own audience have been, well, lashing out against Shapiro and his commentary following, the assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
The system is bursting at the seams. They've been playing good cop, bad cop with us for decades now. This is the entire industry. And anytime you say maximize profit on healthcare, they are always, no matter what happens, that's their only goal. They're always going to cover the least amount and charge you the most amount.
The media is getting pretty upset because it turns out that the people have spoken and they believe that the UnitedHealthcare CEO assassin, Luigi Mangione, is a looker.
This is a strong person of interest. He matches the description of the identification we've been looking for. He's also in possession of several items that we believe will connect him to this incident.
Police have now apprehended a man by the name of Luigi Mangione in connection with the assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He is the person of interest they were looking for, and they have noted that there are several elements of evidence indicating that he is in fact the individual who opened fire and assassinated the CEO in the early morning hours last Wednesday. Now, here's why police think that Mangione might be the killer here. According or among the lines in the two-page document found on strong person of interest, Luigi Mangione, are now the following two quotes. Quote, "These parasites had it coming," end quote, and "I do apologize for any strife and trauma, but it had to be done." A police official who had seen the document told CNN. In the note, Mangione says he acted alone and that he was self-funded, and there's a reason to believe he was self-funded. You look into his biography and he was not someone living in poverty by any means. We'll get to that in just a minute. Now, he also had a gun along with a suppressor similar to the one used in the assassination, as well as multiple fake IDs. The suspect, if you guys can recall, had checked into a hostel in New York City using a fake ID. Police believe that the gun was a so-called ghost gun, meaning that it could have been 3D printed. As for the fake IDs, in Altoona, Luigi Mangione was found with a fake New Jersey driver's license bearing the name Mark Rosario and an address in Maplewood, an affluent suburb of Newark, a senior law enforcement official said. The official said the same name and address were used by the man believed to be the shooter when he checked into a hostel in Manhattan in November. Now, Mangione was apparently eating at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania when an employee of said restaurant recognized him and called the police. Now, soon after Thompson was assassinated, the New York City Police Department released his photo, which most of you have likely already seen, in the hopes that citizens would help identify the shooter. This was actually one of the mistakes he made because he briefly took his mask down. Some say to flirt with the person at the front desk of this hostel. Though it's hard to credit the break in the case to any one moment or piece of evidence, Joseph Kenney, the New York Police Department's chief of detectives, said that if he had to, it would be the release of that photograph to the media. So that basically that led to his capture.
Yeah, so super interesting case here. First of all, I'm gonna assume it's him because his manifesto was with him, so pretty clear. So second of all, let's talk about some of the negatives here, which are significant. First of all, he believes in violence already. Hate it, can't stand it, definitely the wrong direction, okay, in my opinion. Number two, he used the word parasites to describe his enemies. Giant red flag. So having been called a parasite a couple of times recently in debates, it's concerning. So guys, stop using dehumanizing language against anyone else on whichever side you think is the opposite of you, right? So whether it's Israel, Palestine, whether it's right wing, left wing, etc., we've got to stop calling each other insects, bugs, parasites, etc., etc. This is terrible. So him shooting the CEO, obviously horrific, and I condemn it whatever's beyond 100%, okay? So now when you start looking into some of the things that he said, it gets interesting. So I think, so yeah, he agreed with Tucker Carlson and
he was a fan of Elon Musk. He agreed with Tucker Carlson. People immediately jump in the direction of like, let's make this a partisan issue. It's not a partisan issue. Americans across the political spectrum are unhappy with how health insurance and healthcare is carried out in this country. So I want to be clear about that. And anyone who's immediately distracting from what the heart of this issue is to make it a partisan argument is ridiculous, okay?
But Anna,
that's not to say that I am justifying what this man did. Violence is not the answer here and is not going to reform our healthcare system, which we do desperately need.
But that's the point I was going to, which is that it's not that we shouldn't discuss his partisanship. It's that his partisanship is unclear, and that is what's so interesting about this moment. That he could think, hey, I follow Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, but think that our privatized healthcare system is so outrageous and atrocious that he murdered the CEO of one of the privatized health insurance companies. That is amazing and fascinating. And so you don't have to agree with it, and you don't have to agree with whoever he follows or his policy of choice, whatever that might be, to find that moment in politics interesting. So, and what has become the reaction, which we're going to talk more about later in the show as well, is also interesting because tons of right-wing leaders came out and said, what a despicable guy, and he makes no good point about our system, etc. And right-wing followers of theirs have rebelled and said, no, I mean, we don't agree with what he did, but he makes a terrific point about this healthcare system. So there is an uprising here kind of against any kind of established system, whether it is the establishment as we know it, or propaganda outlets, including right-wing propaganda outlets. And there's a rebellion that is a part of the country. This is an unfortunate part of that rebellion in that this is taking it in the wrong direction because it involves violence and that guy had kids, etc. This is not the right way to go. But the fact that the country is now in mass rebelling against corporate rule is a fascinating moment here. One last quick thing about the partisanship. Look, you can look at the list of books you read and go, okay, I hate those people, etc. But then you notice, oh, Lorax is on the list. Am I supposed to hate Dr. Zeus? Right? Don't worry about where the ideas came from other than that, hey, go do violence. That's an idea that's problematic, right? But every other idea should be discussed, and not because somebody did a shooting or because somebody did a shooting, we shouldn't shut down the conversation. We need to have that conversation either way.
Yeah, and look, the point that I want to make is I totally empathize with people who didn't shed a tear for the CEO. I think that's different from cheering on or wanting vigilante justice to be part of the solution to a broken healthcare system, because vigilantism will very, very quickly devolve into something that will very likely victimize the very people who are calling for it. So for instance, the justification that you hear time and time again, I emphasize with people who are upset at UnitedHealthcare or our healthcare system in general, or this particular CEO in general, considering the 32 to 33% denial rate at this health insurance company when it came to legitimate claims. And that was based on analysis by our own federal government, by the way.
Another analysis had it at 32%.
Yeah.
So they're denying a third of all claims,
That's insane.
Which is monstrous.
That's insane and unacceptable. So I totally agree with that. But look, my fear is when you start making justifications for vigilante violence, consider, there are people we disagree with who have their own thoughts and would like to carry out vigilante violence, and they justify it by saying, well, that person deserved to die because they were killing innocent people. Perfect example is what happened to George Tiller, who was one of the few late-term abortion doctors in Kansas, and was gunned down by an anti-abortion extremist who believed that, well, this is a doctor, a physician who's killing innocent babies.
Hey, look, I don't even understand that. That's not a conversation that's legitimate, right?
No, it doesn't reform anything. It doesn't change anything.
So I remember after 2008 economic crash, lots of countries are boiling over in rage, including Greece, and they went to go shoot some bankers. And what did they do? They shot a teller and killed this innocent working person and didn't shoot any of the CEOs, the bankers, et cetera. And if they had, that wouldn't have made it any better. You have to fix the underlying system. Just randomly shooting different actors in that system doesn't do you any good. So, but look, those two things are different, and I want to be super clear about that. The violence is a terrible idea as a matter of any kind of process, it should not include violence, right? But that is totally distinct from what is the violence about? What is the issue at hand here, right? So, because if you do the logical extension of one of the positions here and you go, oh, okay, since he shot the CEO, we should not have a conversation about privatized healthcare right now because that only helps the shooter or whatever, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, under that logic, if somebody in the, God forbid, in the defense industries gets shot, does that mean we can never discuss defense? We can never discuss foreign policy. We can never discuss anything. No, that's absurd. You can still have a conversation about it. You should. And as I said in last week's show, 76,000 people die every year because of our privatized healthcare system. They don't have health insurance. So are we allowed to talk about other deaths? Are we also allowed to talk about those 76,000 people who are dead every year?
I'm gonna say it right now, okay? For any gatekeepers out there who wanna gatekeep any conversation at any given time, we're gonna have any goddamn conversation we want at any goddamn time we wanna have it. So if we wanna talk about the necessary reforms to our healthcare system right now, following the assassination of an executive for a healthcare company, yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it right now, and I don't care if people get offended by that. Now is the time to do it.
Yeah, 100%, and the whole country is asking for it. So by all means, for God's sake, universal healthcare, countries that have it have half the price, half the cost that we do. Why are we paying twice as much? Where's that money going? And it's going into this insane industry that profits off of all of our deaths. And when I say all of our deaths, it's not just those 76,000 according to studies that die every year because they don't have health insurance. It's also because on average, we live 4 years less than countries with universal health care. So that's killing all of us 4 years earlier than we would have died if we lived in a developed nation that has universal health care. We need to have that conversation now about the country.
Absolutely. Just a few more details that we're learning, and of course, this is a developing story. So, Mangione was arrested on firearm charges in Pennsylvania, and if he is in fact the killer, if that is proven, it would mark the end of a 5-day manhunt. It did take some time to find him. Over the weekend, there was an image of the assassin in a taxi cab that was also released. And police also found a backpack that they believe the shooter left behind, which contained both fake money from the Monopoly board game as well as a jacket. So here's a photo of the backpack that they found. Now, as far as the suspect here, he's 26 years old, and he received a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. A Goodreads profile likely belonging to him wrote this in a review of the Unabomber's manifesto. Quote, "It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write this off as a manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems it identifies. But it's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out." He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people, while these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite. However, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. In his review, Mangione also wrote thoughts someone else had shared about the Unabomber in a Reddit thread online, quoting a commenter who had described I can never say this guy's Kaczynski's act as war and revolution, saying that he had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere, and that violence never solved anything. In a statement uttered by cowards, a statement uttered by cowards and predators.
Yeah, so again, his ode to violence is totally wrong. Violence almost always goes in the wrong direction, almost always helps authoritarian figures who would actually prop up the very worst instincts of society. So going in that direction is nonsensical. Having said that, so what you're all supposed to say in media when there's a killer like this is, oh, he's crazy, he's an idiot, he's this, that, the other thing. No, look, whether he's quote unquote crazy is something that the law will have to decide. But he's look, I'm afraid that I'm gonna get yelled at for saying this, but to Anna's point, we're gonna say whatever makes sense. He's unfortunately a smart guy, Okay, he's an engineer. He went to Penn, which is an Ivy League school. I read some of his writings. Obviously, I don't agree with any of the calls for violence, etc. And obviously, I don't agree with some of the right-wing things that he writes. But having said that, he's not a dumb guy. He's not just like, oh my God, these thoughts don't make any sense, and they're a mishmash, and they're not logically connected. No, they're logically connected, and there are real issues that he's pointing out. But my God, this is the worst way to handle legitimate issues, because one of the things I'm worried about is, so for example, he talks about a disconnect that we have in modern society. And he talks about it in the context of Japan, for example. And he says things, if we're being honest, that are similar to stuff that I'll say that I've said on this show, right? Hey, we need more human interaction. We need more personal interaction. And by the way, shooting people is the worst possible way you can get more human interaction. But anyway, so you separate out the ideas, and you don't have to give any legitimacy to any or ownership to those ideas to him, right? But these are ideas that exist in the world and should be discussed, and most importantly about healthcare in this case. But he should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We cannot let this get out of control. If people start shooting one another, it's going to be an epic disaster. But we also need to get our healthcare under control. And right now, I'm gratified to see both the right, the left wing, and the independents, and everyone across the political spectrum going, no, we didn't fix this. I don't know if the Democrats are pretending that we fixed it, and the Republicans are pretending they have a concept of a plan to fix it in another decade, right? But the reality is we didn't fix this at all, and this healthcare system is killing us for profit, and that's inarguable.
Socialist Nathan Robinson, a complete useless leech on the ass of society, posted himself, quote, live your life in such a way that people will be sad when you die. That was above a screen cap of a New York Times headline that said, torrent of hate for health insurance industry follows CEO's killing. That piece from the New York Times is all about people who apparently were perfectly fine with the murder of Brian Thompson on the streets of New York City.
In a development that I'm sure a lot of people did not expect, members of Ben Shapiro's own audience have been, well, lashing out against Shapiro and his commentary following, the assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now, his own fans are calling him out for being completely out of touch with nearly all Americans who do absolutely hate our broken healthcare system. And so he published a video titled "The Evil Revolutionary Left Cheers Murder." Now, right off the bat, he's making a mistake by thinking that it's only people on the left who have been cheering on the murder or assassination of that executive. Fact of the matter is, a lot of people across the political spectrum had been either sharing that they feel no empathy for Brian Thompson or even going so far as to celebrating it. And if you take a look at the thumbnail for the video, he has an image of Taylor Lorenz, who also, was explaining why it is that people are celebrating this, or why people would want UnitedHealthcare CEO dead. Shapiro went well beyond just condemning messages of joy or mockery about the shooting. That alone is totally understandable. In fact, we have done that ourselves. I don't ever want to encourage violence or murder. I don't think that's the way to solve the issues that we're having with our healthcare system. But he went to some extreme lengths to defend Thompson and the screwed up predatory system he was a major player in. Take a look.
Unfortunately, bubbling under the surface of all this is something very serious, really serious. What is that serious thing? The revolutionary left is creeping into the mainstream. The shooting of Thompson has unleashed a wave of evil from members of the left. Thompson was not a criminal. He wasn't even an advocate of death, the way, for example, abortion or euthanasia advocates are. Brian Thompson's great sin, according to these people, is that he was the head of a company that exists within a mixed private-public healthcare framework, and that he did his job, because that's how health insurance actually works. Some things are covered and some things are not. And you may not like the application of the coverage, and it may be bad. That is not an excuse for murder.
So in case you missed it there, according to Ben Shapiro, reproductive rights activists are more responsible for killing people than a company that routinely denies claims for healthcare coverage. In fact, UnitedHealthcare specifically has been found to reject anywhere between 32% to 33% of claims. Keep in mind, understand what that means, guys. Okay, that is a ton of people who pay into the system, pay their monthly payment to UnitedHealthcare, and then once they need that health insurance company to provide coverage for life-saving procedures, they're denied. That's unacceptable. And I can understand the rage people are feeling at this broken system. He also hilariously suggests that Bernie Sanders criticizing the system is a form of stochastic terrorism.
This is why socialist, leech, scavenger lingo used by people like Bernie Sanders, if you want to talk about stochastic terrorism, if you want to talk about rhetoric that leads to a higher possibility of violence, when you suggest that everything in American life is unfair and bad and rigged by the system, when you suggest that, and then you suggest that anybody who does business is merely an apparatchik of that system, the result is a support for revolutionary violence. You're raising that temperature. It's going to stop bubbling and it's going to start bursting out into the open.
So I'm uncertain as to what Ben Shapiro expected after he put this video out. I mean, I don't think I even expected that he'd get the backlash that he's received from his own audience members, but the backlash was swift. So I'm gonna give you a few examples. One of his viewers writes, this isn't a left versus right issue. It's the working class versus the wealthy, and that's probably why you're trying to pretend it's something it's not. Another person writes, as a conservative, I'm sick of rich elitists destroying the family unit, quite literally. I'm proud the left and right have united. I may not vote the same way, but damn it, I can agree we are tired of being pushed around. Another person writes, according to Ben, I went from Trump voter to revolutionary leftist in the span of a month. Another person writes, hate to break it to you, buddy, but it's not just the left who's sick of this. One other viewer says, imagine being so blatantly in the wrong that you managed to unite two opposing ends of the political spectrum during one of the most divided periods in recent memory. Another person writes, I'm not buying this left versus right crap anymore, Ben. I want healthcare for my family. There's more. Those are just a few examples. So, Cenk, this is something that we've been talking about a lot. There is this populist sentiment among voters on both sides of the political aisle.
So guys, first of all, told you the populist right wing is real. It's not imaginary. They're not all evil, racist, sexist, etc. Whatever you're hearing on other shows, okay? So look at them rebelling against the Daily Wire. It's amazing. It's never happened before in my lifetime. So Anna and I have been telling you that this is bubbling not after the election. We started telling you before the election. I started going on all those shows before the election, right? And I did the populist plank on tyt.com before the election. So it's real, and it is, to me, it's super exciting. It's not about Trump. It's about, hey, can we find unity and real agreement with right-wing and left-wing populists? And the answer appears to be yes. So now, Daily Wire to me is the epicenter of old right-wing media. So I've broken down before how Ben frames almost every issue from the perspective of an incredibly wealthy person or a giant corporation. He'll say things like, a person wants to start a business and they've got $20 million and you can't let them blah, blah, blah. I'm like, who has $20 million that they're starting a business with? Why are we even having this conversation? Because he thinks from a rich person's perspective, and his own audience is getting tired of it, okay? And I can give you 100 examples of that. But interestingly, this is really important. What is the second thing Daily Wire is known for? Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, etc. Culture wars. What do culture wars do? They divide us. So hey, dude, remember it's really the trans people that are the problem. And immigrants is a complicated question, but immigrants are the problem. Look down at the people who have less power than you, right? And our answer is no, brothers and sisters, look up at the people who have more power than you. Those are the people who are actually fixing the rules and fixing the situation so we live under corporate rule and are their indentured servants for the rest of our lives. And that is what the revolution is about. It should never be violent, it should never be physical, because that'll delegitimize the movement. But he's worried about a populist revolution, and that's the one thing he's right about, because we're coming.
I want to go to the last graphic here because I think this is important. I just realized your entire business model requires that us normal folk hate each other.
Exactly.
Let's not feed into that. 21,000 likes on that comment. So people are waking up, and I think that while it is totally okay to condemn violence and murder, which we do, and we agree with Ben on that, we do not agree that the healthcare system is all hunky-dory and we all need to sit down and shut up.
All right, if we're the ones leading the revolution, I'm super happy about it. Left-wing populists, right-wing populists, come here. Let's do an actual revolution against corporate rule in this donor class. Don't listen to anyone in right-wing or left-wing media who tells you, oh no, the establishment Republicans and Democrats are the answer, and this current system is wonderful, and nothing should fundamentally change. He sounds like Joe Biden when he says that. All right, we've got a lot more of this in the bonus episode for our members, tyt.com/team if you want to join, or hit the join button below on YouTube. We'll see you there.
We're learning more information about the assassin behind the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. His name is Luigi Mangione, and his manifesto, which he had in his possession when the police arrested him, has now been made public by Ken Klippenstein, who managed to obtain it. So you can read the entirety of the very short manifesto on Ken Klippenstein's Substack. But I have a few excerpts that I think are worthy of reading to you right now, because it does shed light on what his motive was in this assassination. And yes, it does confirm what we had suspected. So he wrote, "I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the United States has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42nd in life expectancy. United is the," and then he writes something indecipherable, "largest company in the US by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No, the reality is these, indecipherable, have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it." And then finally, the last excerpt I'll read to you. "Many have illuminated the corruption and greed decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty." So to me, obviously, this clarifies what motivated him to carry out this assassination, and it was what we all suspected anyway. But as Cenk and I have been talking about, regardless of how you feel about the assassination itself, the fact of the matter is, murdering one individual, one executive in a very broken healthcare system, unfortunately, does nothing to change that broken healthcare system. It's a systemic issue. It's a huge issue that we've had in this country for a long, long time. And it's not only due to the health insurance companies, it also has to do with the exorbitant rates that providers charge the health insurance companies. That leads to denials of claims, and it's just a terrible, broken system, period.
Yeah, so look, here's something else I want to say about this killing. The system is bursting at the seams. They've been playing good cop, bad cop with us for decades now. Democrats and Republicans, they both take corporate money, they do what they want. Corporate media comes in and whitewashes it, and Fox News and MSNBC play good cop, bad cop, etc. And they had us controlled for about 40 years, in my opinion, okay? Maybe even more. So now things are starting to go out of control. One example of that is Donald Trump winning twice. As a right-wing podcaster told us on the Young Turks, we know he's a bull in a china shop, but we hate that china shop so much that we sent the bull in on purpose, okay? So I thought that was an excellent description of why Donald Trump won, because the American people now despise that china shop that is the establishment's most prized possession. And so, and things are bursting at the seams in other ways. You see people yelling at politicians while they're eating. There are people going to people's homes, and now this killing. Why do you think that's happening? If you say, hey, don't look into the root causes, just ignore the problem, you're an idiot, okay? Or you work for mainstream media, or both, right? So the reality is you have to go, oh, I see. Since they have no access to any of the politicians, since their voice is completely and utterly unheard, they're now acting out in ways that are irrational and things that are counterproductive because they're so mad they can't contain themselves. And by the way, look at this on both sides, and we're literally the only show that says this, okay? So on George Floyd, what happened? There were riots that broke out, and what do people say? Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "It's the voice of the unheard," right? And I agree with that. They're like, how many times are cops gonna kill us? And the system's never gonna get fixed. So I'm super mad. That doesn't justify any crimes that happen, but that is why it happened. But Same thing for January 6th. Not for the organizers, not for Trump, not for any of the leaders, but for the guys on the ground. They were so mad, and maybe they got misdirected. I think they got misdirected,
100%, yeah.
right? But why were they so mad? Because they feel unheard, because they keep screaming, I think these guys are crooks. I think the system is corrupt. And that core assumption that they have on the right is true, it's correct. Of course, their own guys are also corrupt, right?
Yep.
But so that is why they both rioted. That's why when this guy does the killing, both the left and the right, some portions go, hell yeah. That's why they're so upset, because this corrupt system never wants to hear from any of us. And we're bursting at the seams, we can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think you're seeing the frustration Americans are feeling, regardless of how they identify politically, manifest in some cases dangerous ways. And bringing up the protests that take place in front of politicians' homes and all of that, yeah, that is threatening to the politicians, and I don't condone it because I don't think that it's actually changing anything. And in fact, it's leading to all sorts of smears against the protesters and an attempt to delegitimize their legitimate concerns in some cases. But people are angry and they're frustrated, and it's because we're living in a system in one of the richest countries in the world, and we're seeing people dying on our streets. We're seeing a situation in which ordinary Americans who are busting their asses at work day in and day out are unable to afford housing for themselves and their family members. The rage is very real, and that doesn't justify carrying out an assassination or murder. But at some point, something's got to give. The system can't keep going on the way that it is. The anger is going to continue building up. So with that in mind, let's move on to some more details about Mangione, because we do have his mugshot. He's a young man, 26 years old, and we're learning more about his own personal health issues. He's 26 and he had some severe back problems. So he is facing murder, illegal gun possession, and possessing a forged instrument charges in New York. In fact, today there was an extradition hearing in Pennsylvania where he was arrested because New York, understandably, is trying to extradite him to their state so he can face these charges and stand trial. And so as he was entering the building for that hearing, he had something to say to the media. Let's take a look at that.
And it's completely out of touch. And it insults the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
All right, so we just heard him yell that about it, sort of something being unjust. This is an insult to the intelligence of the American people.
So clearly he's on message there, and he, again, his manifesto very clearly stated what he has an issue with when it comes to this health insurance company, and he talks about injustice there as he's being dragged into the building for the extradition hearing. Now, he's a Maryland native who was arrested while eating at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. He was also in possession of a ghost gun, according to police, along with that short manifesto expressing anger toward corporate America. The two officers approached and asked him to pull his mask down. And when he did so, both immediately recognized him from the images circulating of the person wanted in connection with the New York shooting. They wrote in the criminal complaint. Soon after the officers wrote, they asked if he had been to New York recently, and the male became quiet and started to shake. So the police claim that they then asked him for ID, and he proceeded to provide them with a fake New Jersey driver's license. And then they told him, if you give us fake identification, we're going to arrest you. And at that point, he told them what his name is. Now, his background was searched at the police station, where officers said that they found a black pistol and silencer that appeared to be 3D printed, along with a loaded Glock magazine with 6 9mm rounds. Joseph Kenney, chief of detectives in the NYPD, said Mangione had a 3-page handwritten document expressing some ill will toward corporate America. That document spoke to his motivation and mindset, said Jessica Tisch, the New York City police commissioner. Now, he's also related to a Maryland delegate, a Republican, which is interesting. He has deep roots in Maryland, and he comes from a pretty wealthy family, which is also interesting. So he's got back issues. He had to have back surgery in July of this year. And so I don't know if his personal experiences with the healthcare system is what motivated him here, but it's just interesting to learn that this was not a guy coming from a poor family. Like his family owns a country club. They own like nursing homes for the elderly, of course. And so, yeah, that's what we're learning.
So look, I'm gonna make another point that sounds random, but it isn't. So sometimes when people get, when the system gets mad at someone like this, instead of doing what's rational, so in my mind, you try him, and then if he's guilty, this is a premeditated murder, I would say life sentence, okay? So that's a rational reaction to it, and that vents your frustration, your anger with him in a legitimate way through the justice system. But my guess is that they're going to make, at some point, a decision not to air anything he says.
Yep.
And I hate that, and I think that's totally wrong, okay? So he's gonna come out and they're gonna say, oh, we don't wanna encourage other shooters. I get the logic of it, But we can't be a society where we say, nope, we're gonna bottle everything up, and this burst out because we were bottling everything up, and we got a great idea. We're gonna bottle it up even further. So we're not gonna let him speak at trial, we're not gonna let him do this, we're not gonna let him talk to reporters, we're not gonna let him do any of that, and that's why you see them shooing him away instantly. Oh my God, don't let him talk to any human being ever and bottle it up, right? I think it's a terrible idea. So I think that he should have a normal trial, and he should get to go on the stand, and we should get to hear what he says, etc. And of course, as I've been saying throughout, the mainstream media should buy a clue and wonder why people are so mad, and maybe look into how many people does this system kill every single year. Why are people so mad? How much do people get denied? And what are the devastating consequences? I've yet to see one person featured who died because a family member.
They don't care. They don't care. The
because
media
the insurance
doesn't
denied
care.
them.
They don't care. They don't care. Okay, just like navigating the system right now, myself, on behalf of a loved one, a close family member, it's one of the most alienating and awful experiences ever. And you feel super alone, and you feel like there's no justice and there's no solution, and you don't know what to do. And this is why, in some cases, families literally lose everything, go bankrupt in attempting to help get their loved one the health care that they need to survive. I mean, Cenk, there are things that there are things that get denied that make no sense. Like, for instance, someone who has kidney failure and needs dialysis. That should be covered. There shouldn't be any issues with that, okay?
Because if you don't get it, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And the healthcare system that we have now goes, yeah, but that costs me a lot of money, and I'd rather make $20 billion a year than save your life. And we're all supposed to be okay with that. And so this is an unhealthy way of dealing with that, but both the politicians and the media provide absolutely no healthy way of dealing with it.
The other thing I want to just quickly mention is that his family was desperately trying to get in touch with him. So I think there's a part of this story that we don't have clarity on yet in regard to his mental health, because basically his mother had put out notice looking for him. So the American Prospect had a great report out that showed that on September 21st, a cousin of Mangione's reached out to his classmates from high school, hoping to get in touch with him. And the message referring to Mangione read, this is graphic 10, "Have you heard anything from him in the past couple months, or know anyone who has? He got back surgery about 6 months ago, and we haven't heard from him since." So none of the high school classmates had heard from him at all. Additionally, Mangione's own mother filed a missing persons case with the San Francisco Police Department on November 18th, according to the San Francisco Standard. Based on the date and contents of the text message, Mangione had not been heard from for a couple of months before that, at least by his family. And so that's an element of this story that is currently developing, and I'm sure we're gonna learn more moving forward, but it's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah, but I don't know that anyone does this kind of assassination without some sort of mental health issue. So like that would be the least surprising thing in the world. So yeah, it's what unites the shooters, or whether they're mass shooters, school shooters, political shooters, there's two things that unite them, usually mental health issues and guns. So, but you could fill in the blank on their ideologies, and some of the ideologies are garbage. And in this case, this is a super rare case where his ideology is not weird or or crazy. If you minus the murder, I would bet that at least 70% of the country agrees with what he wrote.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's merit to what he's arguing. There is not merit and it is not justified to murder someone.
Yeah,
it doesn't solve
of
anything
course.
and it's wrong, period.
Last week, when that image of him pulling down the mask and also with the eyebrows in the car and stuff like that, did you, for a moment, did you think to yourself, you know, that looks like Luigi?
That wasn't a connection that I was making. And of course, Italians in New York are a dime a dozen. So just the jaw structure alone, the face, that wasn't a connection that I was really rushing to make. So I really just brushed that off when I saw it, to be honest.
Okay, well, this is anti-Italian discrimination, and we here at TYT, especially me, will not stand for it. But John, as an Italian yourself, how do you feel about this man calling you a dime a dozen?
Look, I don't normally take seriously these slights against Italians, although they are common. I make them myself. That one just felt so needless. Why? First of all, what are you talking about? Who's walking around Italy or around New York just like Italians everywhere? Like that's not my experience in New York. And also, you couldn't have phrased that any other way. Like literally imagine any other group being used other than Italians might be the funniest group to use in that example. And I'm not taking it that personally, but you couldn't have worded that any other way.
I mean, it is Fox, so I'm not surprised. Okay, it is what it is. But no, but in all seriousness, there are some critical updates to the case. That's the reason why we're doing this story. We're not just going to talk about, Italian discrimination. So over the past 24 hours, the assassin Mangione's attorney has been basically doing the rounds in the media. I don't know if this person is like a public defender who got assigned to his case. He's not doing Luigi any favors here. But nonetheless, he says that Luigi is challenging New York's extradition request and plans to plead not guilty because he hasn't seen any evidence, and that any evidence tying him to, the actual shooter. So let's take a look.
Listen, I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter, and I've seen zero evidence at this point, and so I'm not even aware of what any charges.
Are you standing by that statement that you've seen zero evidence tying Mangione to the murder?
That's correct. We had a brief hearing yesterday, and there was one document, an arrest warrant from the state of New York, which merely referenced a statute. We've seen no evidence. That's one of the many reasons why we're challenging the extradition at this point, so we can see some evidence and get a little more detailed information about the charges against Luigi.
What about the gun? What about the writings?
Well, as I indicated yesterday, I have not been made aware of any evidence that links the gun that was found on his person to the crime.
Well, now there's some evidence, okay, including evidence tying the shell casings that were found at the scene of the assassination to Luigi Mangione's gun. So that's kind of damning, Also,
he's not been made aware of that, so it doesn't count.
Right. Look, to be fair, I mean, he's the lawyer, so it's not like he's going to do the media rounds and be like, yeah, there's a lot of evidence tying my client to the crime, but no, like he's not going to say that. But also, don't do the interviews. Like he's doing every interview. I mean, this guy, he's Cenk Uygur. Like he says yes to everything. Okay, it's okay to say no time to time. You don't have to be on every interview. But here he is. He's talking. If you're not going to be able to answer any of these questions because it's going to incriminate your client, then just don't do the interviews. Now, there's other evidence found as well. Fingerprints found at the scene of the assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEOs match those of suspect Luigi Mangione. Two law enforcement officials briefed on the matter told CNN on Wednesday. I mean, do we want to trust the law enforcement officials who spoke to the press? I mean, you decide. I'm going to go ahead and trust them, though, in this case. I don't think they have any interest in lying about it. It's unclear where exactly the fingerprints were discovered, though. But this is the first positive that was the first positive forensic match tying Mangione directly to the crime scene. And then later they were able to tie the shell casings to the gun that was found on his person when he was discovered at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. Now, the lawyer has yet to comment on that discovery. And as we know, Mangione's manifesto illustrated his frustration with America's healthcare system. The NYPD assessment, based on Mangione's manifesto and social media post, says that he appeared to view the targeted killing of the company's highest ranking representative as a symbolic takedown and a direct challenge to its alleged corruption and power games, asserting in his note that he is the first to face it with such brutal honesty. And along with that handwritten claim of responsibility, I mean, there's a lot of evidence here, right? Like the handwritten manifesto. Along with that, he was taken into custody, and investigators are now looking at what he had written in a spiral notebook. So apparently he had other, written material on him. It included to-do lists to facilitate a killing, as well as notes justifying those plans. In one notebook passage, Mangione wrote about the late Ted Krasinski, the so-called Unabomber who justified a deadly bombing campaign as an effort to protect against the onslaught of technology and exploitation. What did I say incorrectly? Because you guys are both laughing at me right now.
No, it was just the name. That's all. It's not important.
Did I say it incorrectly? I always mix up that guy's name.
I heard Krasinski, like the guy from The Office.
Sorry, I know, I always do that.
Yeah, he's always been a little bit suspicious, I think, but.
Whatever, the Unabomber, that's what I'm talking about, okay? The Unabomber. We all know who that guy is. Okay, so he specifically wrote, the assassin, specifically wrote a note about going to the UnitedHealthcare Investor Conference in New York. In the notebook passage, Mangione concludes using a bomb against his intended victim could kill innocents, and shooting would be more targeted, musing what could be better than to kill the CEO at his own bean counting conference. A law enforcement official briefed on the matter told CNN. Man, this guy really, really hated corporate America. And I don't know what murdering someone in cold blood accomplishes. I get that there are a lot of people online, again, we've talked about this, who are celebrating it, but I really don't think violence and an assassination is the answer. This is doing nothing to reform our healthcare system. And in fact, the only thing that people are focusing on is, oh, how bad are these people who are celebrating, the assassination of a CEO? That's what everyone's focusing on, rather than focusing on the very real problem that we are facing in this country, which is a broken healthcare system. But nonetheless, John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, look, I think there's a couple different things coming out of it in terms of conversation. I do think that the media strike back against the people posting about it could radicalize people to sort of center reform for healthcare even more in their politics potentially. And look, by the way, I'm not posting memes and stuff like that. Like that goes beyond what I'm interested in doing. I'm not trying to scold anybody. It's not to my taste necessarily, but I understand people's frustration, especially those who either themselves have been through the system and been abused by it, or the virtually everyone in America who at the very least knows someone who has. And so I understand the rage. I also think it's potentially a moment for some in media to once again start talking about healthcare and the lingering, issues in it. People are really dissatisfied with the current system. Support for single-payer healthcare is higher than it's been in many, many years. I think that particularly at this time, that's very important for what I think, people on our side of the aisle should be focusing on themselves over the next couple of years leading into the midterms. And so, yeah, I agree. Don't kill people is generally my message that I give to everyone. I would also say to the lawyer, it looks like he did it. Like it looks a little bit bad. I'm not saying that stuff couldn't have been forged or whatever, but that's the only out you have at this point. It's just about as bad as I once saw a trial proceeding where a guy's internet search history was being read out with timestamps. He was alleged to have murdered someone, and it was like 9:34. How do you get rid of a body? 10:11. The body's starting to stink. And it's like I think he did it at that point. That's going to be hard to explain away. And so, it's going to bother a lot of people. And who knows what will end up happening with the jury or whatever in this, but it definitely seems like he's the guy that did it.
I mean, there's so much hatred toward our healthcare system. Can you imagine him standing trial and the jury acquits him?
It's possible. There's a lot of defense mechanisms against that in the system, but it is not impossible.
That would be crazy. I'm so curious to see how this all plays out. But we're gonna wait and see. And in the meantime, we'll update you as we learn more about this case and the evidence that's being compiled, and whether or not he's maybe gonna somehow miraculously win the extradition denial that he's hoping for. So we'll see.
In just the last 24 hours, social media users have seized on the suspect's appearance. It's yet another sign of the toxicity of the public discourse in the U.S.
He's a murderer, a killer. And I worry that our society in general tends to kind of like the outlaw.
Only if he's good looking.
Maybe you may be right. I mean,
if he were a pudgy little guy, nobody would support him.
For those news organizations and media figures, that ain't it. That's not it in any way, shape, or form. And for those news organizations and media figures to make light of it in any way, it's absolutely reprehensible.
Last word to you, Jesse.
I just don't think the guy's that good looking.
I don't either. His eyebrows are horrible.
I took a poll of my staff, the females today, and they said he was average.
The media is getting pretty upset because it turns out that the people have spoken and they believe that the UnitedHealthcare CEO assassin, Luigi Mangione, is a looker, attractive, and he's a thirst trap. And I get it. I totally understand why people would be upset about saying anything positive about a guy who murdered someone in cold blood. However, some news organizations are taking this a bit too far, and I want to give you an example based on some recent reporting from Ken Klippenstein over at his Substack page. He writes that on Tuesday, New York Times management said the news value and public service of showing Mangione's face is diminishing, instructing staff to dial back its use of such photos. It also directed that Luigi's manifesto not be published in the paper. I don't know why they would decide to avoid informing the people about something as important as someone's manifesto, which clearly states what the motive of the assassination was. But nonetheless, we visited the front page of the New York Times when producing this story. And sure enough, there isn't a single image of Mangione's face to be found. So let's take a look at this next graphic. What is extradition? Can fighting it help the Midtown shooting suspect? So only in an article called, titled that, can you see Mangione's back? That's the only image that's available on New York Times website.
Yeah, so look, I get it. Some people find him attractive. They're gonna comment on it and other people are gonna yell at him for commenting on it.
Right.
But can you please trust me that that's not the main point here? And can we focus on the fact that both people on the left and right are furious with health insurance, and that's why they're cheerleading this guy?
Exactly.
And guys, it's not. Think about it this way: like when I've seen shooters throughout, all the time I've been covering news here, they're very, very rarely celebrated outside of a fringe group.
They're
right?
never celebrated.
Yeah, and certainly not in media. Certainly not in a way that burst out into the public.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So whether they're mass shooters, school shooters, whether they're right-wing shooters killing Latinos or synagogue, or it's a left-wing guy doing it, whatever, never celebrated, right? This guy celebrated well before we even knew what he looked like. And why? Because UnitedHealthcare denies 32% of the procedures that people ask for. Now, since that's happened, an avalanche of comments that I've read, let alone all over the internet, right? I got denied for this, I got denied for that. We had cancer. Well, what about you? What do you want me to do? Die? What do you like? And things that you absolutely need for your kids to be able to survive. And they're like, it's an elective surgery. It's not an elective surgery, right? We're not talking about liposuction here, et cetera. There's so many things that they deny that is core to your health and to literally being able to live. And not just them, but all of the entire industry. So if you're focusing on his looks, you've missed the point intensely.
Yes, I agree. So with that in mind, I mean, Cenk is alluding to something very real and something that's felt across the political spectrum. Again, I want to reiterate that doesn't justify murdering people, that doesn't change the system. But I think that our politicians are finally starting to wake up to the fact that the vast majority of Americans are furious at our broken healthcare system. So a new report in The Lever helps to explain why Americans are so furious at the American healthcare system. They write the following: the country's largest health insurers have invested over $120 billion into repurchasing their own shares since the passage of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. And those insurers include UnitedHealth Group, Cigna, Elevance Health, and CVS Health. So these stock buybacks are taking priority over what the company is actually supposed to do for Americans. In recent years, top C-suites across the healthcare industry have authorized more spending on stock buybacks than on company research and development. And the company that did the most stock buybacks, you guessed it, UnitedHealthcare. So 44% of buyback expenditures came from UnitedHealth Group, which covers more Americans than any other private insurer or health insurer. UnitedHealth has increased its annual share repurchasing program by 217% since 2010, dumping a whopping $54 billion into buybacks during that time. Meanwhile, Americans are getting screwed by these exact companies. Families spent an average of 55% more on their healthcare premiums in 2020 than they did in 2010. On a per person basis, healthcare spending by Americans with private insurance grew by 61% from 2008 to 2022. 1 in 4 Americans say they've avoided seeking healthcare in the past year because of the cost. Half of all US adults say they'd be unable to afford an unexpected $500 medical expense, and medical bills account for 40% of US bankruptcies. So I wanna give a little bit of clarification when it comes to that study about the $500 medical expense. It's not that they would go bankrupt if that $500 expense were to be a liability of theirs. It's that they would have to probably charge it on credit cards because they don't just have the cash on hand. So Cenk, take it away.
Yeah, 40% of the bankruptcies, as Anna just read you, are medical bankruptcies. That's nuts. That, again, doesn't happen in any other country. So it's not just that our lives are in danger and our health is in danger as they maximize profit. It's that it also wipes us out financially. They're literally sucking all the money out of the system, out of our, you could barely pay rent, you can't afford houses, and when inflation goes up, you're in massive trouble because God forbid you have a medical issue, your insurance might cover some of it or none of it, and then you got to cover it, and then boom, there you go, you're totally wiped out, right? And on it goes. I mean, there's nonstop stats about the overwhelming percentage of Americans that are affected by this industry. A quarter of Americans, for example, choose not to get health care because they're worried about the cost. So there might be something wrong with them. They might have internal bleeding. They might have an infection and they choose not to go get care. And that's why some of them die because they're so worried about the cost. So this is a system that is very literally killing us. And as it's doing that, they're taking $120 billion off the table in profit seeking. So guys, it's not about, oh my God, UnitedHealthcare CEO is so greedy. And if they had a different CEO, he would be less greedy or more patriotic or more moral. It doesn't work that way. This is the entire industry. And anytime you say maximize profit on healthcare, they are always, no matter what happens, if that's their only goal, they're always going to cover the least amount and charge you the most amount, because that is how you maximize profits. So all of these nonsense conversations about is someone moral or is the other person immoral is irrelevant and ridiculous. If you make it a for-profit system, we will always get terrible results. Remember guys, if you have universal health care like every other developed nation, you can layer on private health care on top. Nobody's stopping you from that, right? But you've got to at least protect the citizens through cops, firefighters, military, and health insurance.
So is there any hope of our lawmakers working on legislation to fix this broken system? And would that legislation even come to fruition? Well, look, I'm gonna be honest. Obviously, at this moment, with the corruption baked into our system, the chances are still very low. However, there is a small development that I want to talk about. So yesterday, there was a bipartisan group of senators and congresspeople who introduced a bill that would take on certain healthcare companies. The federal legislation would prohibit companies that own drug middlemen, aka PBMs, or health insurers from also owning pharmacy businesses. So CVS Health, Cigna, and UnitedHealth each own a major health insurer, a pharmacy benefit manager, and a pharmacy business. Any company that owns a PBM and or health insurer and a pharmacy business, based on this legislation, if it were to pass, would be forced to divest from their pharmacy business within 3 years. The Senate bill was sponsored by Democrat Elizabeth Warren and Republican Josh Hawley. By the way, Josh Hawley has really shown in good faith that he is willing to work across the aisle to pass some of these economic populist bills. So I want to give him credit for that every time he does it. It's really good to see it. Now, the House bill was sponsored by Democrat Jake Auchincloss and Republican Diana Harshbarger. These names are hard. Anyway, Warren said of the bill, PBMs have manipulated the market to enrich themselves, hiking up drug costs, cheating employers, and driving small pharmacies out of business. That is absolutely true. I think a lot of people have seen this happen in their own neighborhoods. My new bipartisan bill with Senator Josh Hawley will rein in these middlemen. And by the way, Josh Hawley released a statement saying the insurance companies are out of control. They need to be broken up. No more buying up doctors' practices. Totally agree. Private equity firms have been doing that and it's been a disaster. No more owning pharmacies. Start putting patients first. New bill would do.
Yeah, so when Josh Hawley stopped taking corporate PAC money, saying some positive things. And I said, oh, look at that, that's interesting. You know, the minute he stops getting funded by corporate rule, he starts opposing corporate rule. And a lot of folks on the left said, oh, you're so naive. That's Josh Hawley, he's so evil. He's not gonna actually vote that way, this is all a trick. Except that now he's starting to vote that way. And not only vote that way, he's co-sponsoring the bills. And he's now done this a number of times. It doesn't mean you have to agree with his other opinions. His social opinion, his opinions on social issues, cultural war issues, I hate them. I don't agree with them. And so would I vote for him, you know, over Bernie Sanders? Of course not, because I agree with Bernie on both sides, right? But if you're pretending that he's not actually voting in the right way on some issues and on populist issues, economic issues, you're wrong, he is voting the right way. Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.